It is funny when we talk about the physical world. Things are pretty straightforward, right?
Right.
Like if you are holding a ceramic coffee cup in your hand right now, you know exactly what it is.
Right. Yeah, it is just a physical object.
Exactly. You drop it on the floor and it shatters. It is broken. It completely obeys the basic laws of physics. The atoms are there, the mass is there, and gravity acts upon it.
Unquestionably.
But then you reach into your pocket and you pull out a crumpled green piece of paper with a dead president on it. Or maybe a polymer note, depending on where you happen to live.
Right. And you take that piece of paper to a coffee shop.
Yeah, you hand it to a barista for that coffee.
Yeah.
And the barista gives you this complex, labor-intensive drink in exchange for that paper.
Which is pretty wild when you really step back and look at it.
It really is, because the laws of physics do not explain why that transaction just happened. I mean, that piece of paper has absolutely no nutritional value.
None at all.
It is not a tool you can use to build a shelter. If you are stranded on a deserted island, $1 million in a briefcase would be practically useless. Well, except maybe as kindling for a fire.
Yeah, just to keep warm.
Exactly. Yet in our society, that little piece of paper wields absolute power. It dictates where we live, what we eat, and how we spend the majority of our waking hours.
Well, it is entirely a hallucination,
Mm-hmm.
but it is a collective, highly structured hallucination that we all participate in simultaneously.
A structured hallucination. I like that.
Yeah, we treat money as if it were a physical law of nature like gravity or thermodynamics, but it is really just an invisible architecture of human agreement.
Yeah.
And because we use it every single day, we become completely blind to the fact that it is an engineered system.
Exactly. We stress about it. We work decades of our lives for it. We save it for our children. But have you, listening to this right now, ever actually stopped to ask what money actually is from a purely technological standpoint?
Most people haven't.
Right. Underneath the physical paper, underneath the plastic of your debit card, underneath the numbers on your banking app, what is the invisible machinery making it actually work?
That is exactly what we are going to explore.
Today, we are going to look under the hood. Welcome to this deep dive. We are going to pull from some incredible material originally designed to explain this entire ecosystem to high-level tech executives. We are treating money from the earliest cowrie shells to modern cryptocurrency entirely as an engineering problem.
And framing it that way is incredibly clarifying. We are stripping away the usual noise.
Oh, absolutely. All the noise.
Right, so no volatile price charts, no day trading advice, no social media tribalism, and no laser eyes. We are looking at money and cryptocurrency as pure engineering solutions to very specific computer science and trust problems.
And I think that is so important because it changes the whole perspective.
It does. By doing this, you can actually see the structural load-bearing flaws in our current financial system. And you can see exactly why certain massive technological leaps were completely necessary to bypass those flaws.
So to you listening right now, here is our promise. By the end of this deep dive, you are going to fundamentally understand the invisible architecture of trust that governs absolutely everything.
You really will.
You will understand the dollar bill in your pocket, the global banking system, and why a little 9-page PDF published back in 2008 genuinely and irrevocably changed the internet forever.
It is a fascinating journey. But to understand where we are going and why cryptocurrency was even invented in the first place, we really have to start at the absolute beginning of the problem. We have to define the exact problem that money solves.
Okay, let's unpack this. Before we can even whisper the word crypto, we have to define what money actually is. And the most compelling way to view this, based on our source material, is that money is a technology.
Yes, it is fundamentally a technology.
It is not a physical thing. It is a tool defined exclusively by the jobs it does.
That's right. If you talk to economists, they generally agree that for anything to be considered money, it has to successfully perform 3 core jobs.
3 jobs. Okay, what is the first one?
First, it must be a medium of exchange. This simply means you accept it in a trade because you are supremely confident that a total stranger will accept it from you later. It completely removes the friction of direct trade.
Right, you don't have to trade apples for haircuts.
Exactly. Second, it must be a store of value. If you put it in a vault for a year, or say 5 years, it should still buy roughly the same amount of real-world goods when you take it out.
Which is where inflation comes into play, right?
Yes, perfectly stated. When a national currency suffers from severe inflation, you are watching this specific second function degrade in real time.
And the third job?
It serves as a unit of account. It is the universal ruler, the measuring stick we use to price everything in the economy. We don't say a new laptop costs 400 chickens or 3 months of plumbing labor.
Oh, it'd be exhausting.
It would. We just say it costs $1,000. It standardizes value so we can actually compare apples and oranges in a meaningful way.
I want to zoom in on that first job, the medium of exchange, because economists often talk about the barter problem, and it is honestly hilarious when you actually try to map out the logistics of it.
It is a total nightmare.
It really is. Imagine you are a baker in a barter economy. You have a bunch of fresh bread and your shoes just fell apart. You desperately need a new pair of shoes.
Okay, so you go looking for a cobbler.
Right. You have to go out into the village and find a cobbler, but you can't just find any cobbler. You have to find a cobbler who happens to want your specific sourdough bread.
And not just want it, but want it today.
Exactly today, before it goes stale and loses all its value.
Yes, the academic term for this absolute logistical nightmare is the double coincidence of wants.
The double coincidence of wants.
Right. Both parties in a transaction must have exactly what the other desires in the correct quantities at the exact same moment in time. The friction is just astronomical. It limits the size of an economy to a tiny geographic village.
And the math behind this is a real aha moment. Think about how this scales. If you have a tiny economy with just 1,000 different goods, like apples, horseshoes, firewood blankets, and everyone is bartering, you have to track the exchange rate of every single item against every other single item.
The combinatorial explosion is massive. The formula for the number of prices you have to track is n times n minus 1 divided by 2.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so with just 1,000 unique goods, you are looking at tracking nearly 500,000 separate unique exchange rates in your head.
Wait, nearly 500,000. Just for 1,000 goods.
Exactly. Imagine walking into a market and needing to know the exact conversion rate of apples to horseshoes, apples to woven baskets, baskets to firewood. It requires a cognitive load that human beings simply cannot handle.
You know, as someone who loves software architecture, my brain instantly went to API design when I first understood this part of the material.
Oh yeah, that is a perfect analogy.
I mean, money is basically an indirection layer. It is a universal API. Without money, you have this incredibly messy ON² web where every single item has to directly integrate with every other item.
Right, it is like writing custom integration code for thousands of different software platforms.
Yeah, exactly. If Apple wants to talk to Microsoft, you need custom code. Apple to Google, custom code. But when you introduce money, you completely collapse all of that complexity.
Because every single good only needs to reference one shared protocol.
Right, the money. All trades route through it. You want shoes? Well, you sell your bread for money and then trade that money for shoes. Suddenly you are at ON complexity. Every good just has one price.
That is the perfect way to look at it. Money is the universal API that allows two complete strangers who produce entirely different things to transact without negotiating a custom protocol for that specific interaction.
And humanity didn't just write this API perfectly on the first try, did they?
No, not at all. We have been iterating on it for millennia. We can trace this evolution through three broad historical stages. We move from things that are intrinsically scarce to promises backed by something to promises backed by nothing but collective belief in state power.
Let's walk through those stages. Stage 1 would be commodity money.
Right. Commodity money is a good one that is intrinsically valuable in and of itself, but is universally used as money. Historically, this has been gold, silver, salt, which is actually where the word salary comes from.
Wait, really? From salt?
Yeah. Roman soldiers were often paid in salt. Then you also had cattle or cowrie shells. Its value comes from nature, and its supply is physically limited by the natural world. It takes immense physical effort and energy to dig gold out of the ground or to mine salt.
Okay, so then we move to stage 2, which is representative money.
Yes. As global trade expanded, physically carrying heavy gold or driving herds of cattle across continents became wildly impractical and, frankly, dangerous.
I can imagine.
So representative money emerged as a technological upgrade. This is essentially a claim on a commodity, a paper banknote that explicitly says redeemable for 1 ounce of gold is a promise.
So it represents the physical thing.
Exactly. When you buy something, you aren't handing over the heavy gold itself. You are handing over a trusted paper certificate. The U.S. dollar actually worked exactly this way for a long time under the gold standard.
But there is a vulnerability there, right?
The vulnerability is entirely about trust. You have to trust that the central issuer actually holds the physical gold in a vault somewhere and hasn't printed more paper certificates than they have gold.
Which brings us to stage 3, and this is where I really want to push back a little, or at least play devil's advocate based on what the sources say. Fiat money?
Right, yes, yes.
So the word fiat comes from Latin, meaning let it be done or by decree.
Yeah.
The U.S. fully ended dollar-to-gold convertibility in 1971 under Nixon. So today, practically every national currency on Earth is fiat. It is money simply because the government decrees it is money. Now, especially in crypto circles, you constantly hear this aggressive critique that fiat is backed by nothing. People throw that phrase around like it is a mic drop. But is that actually true?
It is a fundamental misunderstanding of how the modern world works. Saying it is backed by nothing sounds incredibly damning, as if the US dollar or the euro is just a house of cards waiting for a stiff breeze to knock it over.
Right, that is the narrative.
But the reality highlighted in the source text is that fiat money is backed by something tremendously real, physical, and powerful.
Okay, what is it backed by?
It is backed by the legal requirement to pay your taxes in that specific currency. If you do not pay your taxes in dollars in the U.S., men with guns will eventually come and put you in a cage. It is enforced by the physical power of the state.
Wow. Okay, so it is force.
Yes, it is backed by the rule of law, property rights, the military, and crucially, the entire productive output of the economy that uses it.
Okay, but wait. Let me challenge that. If it is backed by the military and the government, why did the currency in Zimbabwe collapse into hyperinflation? Why did the bolivar in Venezuela become literally cheaper than toilet paper?
That is a great point.
I mean, both of those countries had militaries. Both of them had governments demanding taxes in their local currency. Having an army didn't save their money, so there must be a tipping point where collective belief just completely breaks right.
That is an excellent pushback, and you have hit on the exact vulnerability of fiat. The military and the tax requirement create a baseline demand. They create a floor, but they cannot force the market to value the currency highly if the supply is being fundamentally mismanaged.
So it is a supply issue.
Entirely.
Yeah.
The true critique of fiat money isn't that it is literally worthless. The valid critique is about the centralized control of its supply. When a government runs massive deficits and forces its central bank to print trillions of new units to cover the shortfall, they are explicitly diluting the value of every existing unit.
Right, so everyone else's money loses purchasing power.
Exactly. In Zimbabwe or Venezuela, the central authorities abused their ledger so egregiously that the inflation outpaced the coercive power of the state. The citizens simply abandoned the currency for foreign dollars or barter, despite whatever laws were in place.
That distinction is so critical for the listener to grasp. The critique isn't that the dollar has no value. The critique is that a small room of unelected officials can instantly dilute the purchasing power of the time and energy I spent my life saving.
Precisely.
And if money is just a technology, just an API for exchanging value, then we don't have to just accept the current version. We can take these different iterations, gold, fiat, and eventually crypto, and evaluate them against a standard engineering spec sheet.
Yes. If you were engineering the perfect currency from scratch for a global digital civilization, you would grade it against 6 specific properties.
Okay, what are the 6 properties?
You want it to be highly rated in durability, portability, divisibility, scarcity, acceptability, and fungibility.
All right, let's imagine we are trying to design this ultimate currency. Let's do a comparative analysis of the big 3 gold, fiat, cash, and Bitcoin across these 6 properties. Let's start with durability. Does it survive over time without rotting, decaying, or breaking?
Gold is the undisputed king here. It is an inert, noble metal, so it literally does not tarnish or rust. You can pull a gold coin out of a sunken Spanish galleon after 400 years at the bottom of the ocean, wipe it off, and it is perfectly intact.
That is pretty amazing. What about fiat?
Fiat is okay. Physical paper notes wear out and get destroyed eventually. But most fiat today is just digital ledger entries, which are durable as long as the bank's servers keep running.
And Bitcoin?
Bitcoin, being pure decentralized data, is also exceptionally durable. As long as a few computers on Earth are running the network, the ledger survives intact.
Okay, next is portability. How easy is it to move across space? Imagine you are living in a country where the regime suddenly turns hostile and you need to flee with your life savings tonight.
This specific scenario highlights where gold fails spectacularly.
Why is that?
Because gold is incredibly dense and heavy. Try carrying $1 million in gold bars through an airport security checkpoint or across a hostile border. It will be seized immediately.
Oh, absolutely. What about cash?
Fiat cash is better, but $1 million in $100 bills still weighs about 22 pounds and fits in a briefcase. It is highly suspicious and easily confiscated. Digital fiat in a bank can be frozen with a simple phone call from the government.
Right. And Bitcoin?
Bitcoin is ultimate portability. Your wealth is secured by a 12-word or a 24-word seed phrase. You can memorize those words, walk across a border completely naked with zero physical possessions, and reconstruct your entire net worth on a laptop on the other side of the world.
That is profound. It is wealth stored as pure information in your mind.
Okay, let's move to divisibility. Can you split it into small enough pieces to buy a pack of gum or pay for a microtransaction online?
Gold is fair to poor in this regard. Imagine going to a coffee shop and trying to shave off a microscopic sliver of a gold coin with a metal file just to pay for a latte. It is absurd. Yeah, they wouldn't even know how to weigh it.
Exactly. Fiat is very good here because we have cents and pennies. But Bitcoin takes this to an entirely different computational level.
Yeah, this blew my mind when I first learned it, because a lot of people think they have to buy a whole Bitcoin, which is tens of thousands of dollars.
Right, a very common misconception.
But one single Bitcoin is actually just a unit of measurement. It can be mathematically split into 100 million smaller base units, which are called satoshis.
Named after the creator, yes.
That makes it incredibly divisible. It is perfect for streaming micropayments on a digital scale, like paying 1,000th of a cent for every second of a video you watch.
Exactly. Now let's look at scarcity. Supply limits. How hard is it to produce more of the money?
This is the big one.
It really is. Gold is good here. Mining it is slow, dangerous, and physically demanding. The global supply of gold increases by about 1.5% to 2% a year.
Predictable, but slow.
Right. Fiat is very weak here, as we discussed earlier. Governments can, and routinely do, print trillions of new units with a keystroke, completely diluting the savings of everyone holding it.
And Bitcoin.
Bitcoin is exceptionally strong on scarcity. In fact, it's the first instance of absolute mathematically provable scarcity in human history. Its open source code strictly caps the total supply that will ever exist at exactly 21 million coins, not a single fraction of a coin more.
Wow. Okay, what about acceptability?
Fiat dominates here, hands down. The US dollar is universally recognized, demanded, and accepted globally. Gold is universally recognized as valuable, but you can't pay your taxes or buy groceries with it directly.
And Bitcoin is still growing in that regard.
Yes, it is growing rapidly,
Yeah.
but compared to national currencies, its daily transactional acceptability is still somewhat limited.
Okay, I saved fungibility for last, because when I was prepping for this deep dive, I had to stop and really wrestle with this concept. Fungibility basically means every individual unit is perfectly interchangeable with every other unit, right?
That is the exact definition,
Yeah.
yes.
So a dollar bill is a dollar bill. I don't care which physical dollar you hand me, it spends the exact same at the grocery store. Gold is perfectly fungible too. Melt it down and an ounce is an ounce.
Correct.
Fiat cash is highly fungible. But I have heard experts argue that Bitcoin is not perfectly fungible. Why is that? I mean, if a digital coin is just data, shouldn't one Bitcoin just be a Bitcoin?
It is deeply counterintuitive until you understand the underlying mechanism of a public blockchain. Because every single Bitcoin transaction, from the moment a coin is minted to its current owner, is entirely public and permanently traceable on a global ledger.
Oh, everyone can see it.
Everyone. Which means specific units of Bitcoin carry a permanent, unerasable history.
Wait, so the data literally remembers everywhere it has been?
Exactly. Every output has a lineage. If a specific chunk of Bitcoin was stolen in a massive high-profile exchange hack 3 years ago, or was used in a darknet market transaction, everyone in the world can see that.
Oh, I see.
That specific coin becomes what the industry calls tainted. Now, the math of the protocol doesn't care. The network will still process the transaction flawlessly, but the human layer cares.
Right, the exchanges and banks.
Yes, heavily regulated institutions like Coinbase or big banks use sophisticated chain analysis software. They might flag your deposit and refuse to accept that tainted Bitcoin.
Which means it's less useful.
Exactly, meaning that particular coin is actually harder to use and potentially worth slightly less on the open market than a clean virgin Bitcoin freshly minted by a miner. So unlike a physical $20 bill, which has absolutely no memory of the drug deal it might have been involved in last week, public digital ledgers make perfect fungibility very difficult to achieve.
That is fascinating. The transparency is literally a double-edged sword. So the ultimate takeaway from this spec sheet is that no single money scores perfectly on all 6 properties.
None of them do.
Gold is scarce and durable, but terrible to transport. Fiat is highly acceptable and portable, but struggles massively with scarcity. Bitcoin is incredibly portable, perfectly divisible, and absolutely scarce, but weaker on acceptability and fungibility.
Which is why these technologies coexist. One doesn't just instantly murder the others. They simply serve different human needs.
But for decades, starting in the 1980s, brilliant cryptographers and computer scientists desperately wanted to build a purely digital cash that hit all these marks, didn't they?
And they did.
Yeah.
They wanted the digital equivalent of physical cash.
Yeah.
And they kept failing over and over again.
Why?
Largely because they kept slamming into one massive, seemingly insurmountable technical roadblock.
Which brings us to the ultimate computer science boss battle, the double spend problem. If a digital system is so great at portability and divisibility, why on earth did it take until 2008 to create a working, decentralized digital cash system?
Because of the fundamental physics-level nature of digital data itself. The crux of the problem is that digital data, by its very definition, is trivially and perfectly copyable.
Okay, let's break this down. Think about the difference between a physical transfer and a digital transfer. If I have a physical $20 bill and I hand it to you to buy a sandwich, I no longer have the $20 bill.
Right. The transfer is atomic.
It is a unique physical asset. I cannot take that exact same $20 bill, walk across the street, and spend it again at the grocery store because it is physically sitting in your pocket.
But digital information does not work that way at all.
Not even a little bit. If I have an MP3 file of a song or a PDF document and I email it to you, I am not actually sending you my file.
No, you're sending a perfect duplicate.
Exactly. I am sending a copy. I still have my original copy sitting on my hard drive.
And that property is a fatal flaw if you are trying to create a currency. If a digital coin is just a string of bytes, just a digital file, what is to stop you from sending that exact same file to Alice to buy a car? And then copying that file and sending it to Bob to buy a boat?
Right. It is essentially infinite counterfeiting.
This is the formal definition of the double spend problem. In a purely digital peer-to-peer system, a malicious actor could broadcast two conflicting transactions at the exact same time.
Spending the same money twice.
Yes. They spend a string of bytes with a merchant, and milliseconds later they send a transaction paying that exact same string of bytes back to a second wallet that they themselves control. If the network doesn't have a way to definitively sequence those events and reject the second one, the attacker has spent the same money twice and the merchant is completely defrauded.
So if this is such an impossible physics problem of the digital realm, how did we solve this before crypto? Because I tap my Visa card every day. I use Apple Pay. I send wire transfers. And I absolutely cannot double spend my bank balance.
You definitely cannot.
If I have $50, I can't buy a $50 pair of shoes and a $50 dinner at the exact same time. The card gets declined.
The way the legacy financial world solved it is elegant and highly functional, but it relies on a massive structural assumption. Traditional finance uses a trusted third party.
The middleman.
Yes. When you tap your Visa card for a coffee, you aren't actually handing digital money directly to the merchant like handing them a physical bill. You are sending an encrypted message to a single authoritative database run by Visa, communicating with your bank.
They hold the master list of everyone's money.
Exactly. They check their one canonical record of your balance, they look at your row in their database, they subtract the money from your column, they add it to the merchant's column, and if you try to tap your card again a millisecond later, the database simply refuses the second transaction because the funds are already marked as gone.
So they are the referee.
In database architecture terms, the bank enforces a unique index on a master centralized database. They are the absolute referee of truth.
But the glaring vulnerability here, the thing that keeps system architects awake at night, is that this works incredibly well right up until at the exact moment you have a reason to question that trusted third party.
Yes, that is the weak point.
Because the bank has absolute God mode power over your financial life. They can freeze your account without warning. They can reverse transactions. They can deny you service just because they don't like your business model.
They can also be hacked and leak all your personal data.
Right, or they can make terrible loans and go completely insolvent, taking your deposits down with them. Or they can be compelled by a government to do any of those things to you.
And this centralized model was the only known workable solution for digital money for decades.
Yeah.
In the 1990s, a brilliant cryptographer named David Chaum created a system called DigiCash.
Oh, I've heard of this. It was way ahead of its time.
It was a massive leap forward in cryptographic privacy and digital cash. It had amazing features. But to solve the double spend problem, it still fundamentally relied on Chaum's central company acting as the clearinghouse to verify the transactions and prevent double spending.
And because it had that central issuer, it had a single point of failure. The sources point out that it went completely bankrupt in 1998. The company died, the servers were turned off, and the money just died with it.
This failure raises an incredibly important question, and it forces us to look past just the code and examine the architecture of human trust itself.
Right.
Because the double spend problem isn't just a technical glitch about copying files, it forces us to ask a profound societal question. In any given system, who decides what is true?
Okay, let's unpack this architecture of trust, because this is where the underlying philosophy really starts shining. We essentially have two models for deciding the truth, centralized and decentralized.
Yes, two distinct models.
The centralized model is what we just described with Visa or a traditional bank. It is a hub and spoke model. One entity sits in the middle and all of us are the spokes connecting to it. They keep the ledger.
And we shouldn't dismiss the benefits of that model.
Yeah.
The benefits are very real. It's fast, it is simple to upgrade, it is highly efficient because only one party has to do the computation.
And crucially, it is reversible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If someone steals your credit card and buys a TV in another country, you can call a human being at customer service, explain the fraud, and they can roll back the transaction. They can literally rewrite the truth.
But the cost of that convenience is absolute dependence. They control your financial reality.
Yes, they do.
Then we have the decentralized model, the peer-to-peer approach. Instead of one master database hidden behind a bank's firewall, imagine tens of thousands of independent computers all over the world, each keeping a full, perfectly identical copy of the ledger.
You don't trust a single operator anymore. You trust the underlying math and the shared rules of the protocol.
Before we go deeper into that, we should probably define what a ledger actually is, because the word gets thrown around constantly in crypto and it sounds intimidating.
It does sound complex, but a ledger is incredibly simple. It is just a running record of transactions, a list of who paid whom and when. That is it.
Just a list.
Right. From that long list of additions and subtractions, you can mathematically derive who currently owns what at this exact moment. Your monthly bank statement is just a summarized view of a ledger.
Right. And here's where my tech brain got a little tripped up when I first started learning about blockchains. I thought, wait a minute. Distributed databases have existed for decades. Amazon, Google, Microsoft, they all replicate data across multiple servers globally. So if a data center in Virginia catches fire, the network stays up.
Sure, distributed systems are very common.
So why was a distributed ledger suddenly hailed as this groundbreaking computer science breakthrough in 2008?
That is the exact right question to ask. The breakthrough wasn't the mere replication of data. Google replicates data, but Google owns all the servers. Google sets the rules. Google is the boss.
Okay, so what was the breakthrough?
The breakthrough with blockchain was replication among parties who explicitly do not trust each other, who might actively be trying to defraud each other, and who have absolutely no shared boss or administrator.
Let me use an analogy here for anyone who has ever written code, or even anyone who has used Google Docs. If you write software, you know Git.
Git is a perfect example.
Imagine a global Git repository. Everyone has a full clone of all the code on their local laptop. Every time you make a change, a commit, it is cryptographically chained to the previous one.
Right.
If you try to sneak in and alter an old commit from 3 years ago, it breaks all the math for every single commit that came after it, and the network immediately spots the lie.
Because the history is chained mathematically.
But for the non-coders, think of a massive Google Doc shared by thousands of strangers. But instead of the master copy living on Google servers where Google can delete it or lock you out, everyone has their own identical copy.
Okay, I like this visual.
When someone types a new sentence representing a new transaction, it broadcasts to everyone else.
Right.
But here's the magic part. There is an automatic, mathematically enforced rule for deciding whose sentence becomes official, and there is absolutely no administrator.
Right. Nobody has the power to force an update.
Exactly. The math rejects anyone who types a lie, like trying to spend money they don't actually have.
It is a profound paradigm shift.
Yeah.
How do you get a network of selfish, potentially malicious, anonymous actors all over the globe to all agree on the exact same history of transactions without any single person being in charge?
That was the Holy Grail.
That was the Holy Grail. That was the problem that sat unsolved for 40 years.
And it remained a fascinating abstract academic puzzle right up until reality completely broke in 2008. This theoretical computer science problem crashed into the global economy in a dramatic, devastating way, setting the perfect stage for a revolution.
Context is absolutely everything here. You cannot understand the creation and the philosophy of cryptocurrency without looking at the exact moment in history it was birthed, September 2008.
The global financial system was on the absolute brink of total catastrophic collapse.
Lehman Brothers.
Yes, Lehman Brothers.
Lehman Brothers, an absolute titan of Wall Street. An institution that had survived for 158 years through the Civil War, 2 world wars, and the Great Depression, suddenly filed for bankruptcy.
It sent shockwaves everywhere.
The contagion spread instantly. The credit markets completely froze. The very centralized trust models we were just discussing, the massive banks, the clearinghouses, the trusted third parties, failed catastrophically.
Why did they fail so badly?
They had taken on massive, completely opaque risks in the housing market that nobody fully understood, largely because those centralized ledgers were completely hidden from public view.
And when the music stopped, ordinary people bore the brunt of it. People lost their homes, their jobs, their pensions. Whole neighborhoods were boarded up.
Devastating for the public.
But the institutions that caused it. The U.S. government stepped in and authorized the Troubled Asset Relief Program, or TARP. Up to $700 billion in public taxpayer money was magically created to bail out the very entities that caused the crisis.
It was a real-time, excruciating demonstration of the ultimate hidden cost of centralized financial trust. The entities that failed were rescued, shielded from the consequences of their own actions, while the public bore the losses.
The trusted third parties proved to be fundamentally untrustworthy.
Exactly.
And just 6 weeks later, October 31st, 2008, Halloween. At the absolute height of this global financial panic, a person, or maybe a group of people, using the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto drops a 9-page white paper onto an obscure cryptography mailing list.
The timing is impossible to ignore. It wasn't a coincidence.
The title was Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system.
The opening line of that paper states its goal with clinical precision: to allow online payments to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial institution. It was a direct response to the failure of the banks.
Fast forward a couple of months to January 3, 2009. The very first block of the Bitcoin blockchain is mined by Satoshi. It is called the Genesis block.
And this block is incredibly special.
It is because Satoshi embedded a hidden text message inside the raw data of that first block. It read the Times 03 Jan 2009 Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks.
That is an exact headline from the front page of the Times of London newspaper on that exact day.
So it's a timestamp.
It serves a brilliant dual purpose. First, it acts as a cryptographic timestamp. It mathematically proves that the block could not possibly have been created before that newspaper hit the stands.
And the second purpose?
Far more importantly, it is a permanent, deeply pointed critique. It is an etching in stone of the exact systemic failure that Bitcoin was explicitly engineered to replace. It is Satoshi saying, look at the fiat system failing again.
Yeah.
Here's the alternative.
Now here's where the story turns into modern mythology. We know who runs Visa. We know who the chairman of the Federal Reserve is. But we do not know who created Bitcoin.
It remains one of the greatest mysteries of the internet age.
Satoshi Nakamoto interacted with early developers on message boards for a couple of years, fixing bugs, explaining the vision, and then in 2011 simply vanished, disappeared like a ghost, handed over the control of the source code repository, and just walked away.
And that disappearance is perhaps the most profound and necessary part of the entire system's design.
Why is that? Wouldn't a leader be helpful?
If Satoshi had stayed, he or they would have inevitably become a central figure of authority, a leader, someone who could be pressured, sued, arrested by governments, or corrupted by immense wealth.
Oh, I see. By leaving it became leaderless.
Exactly. By vanishing, a system built entirely on a thesis of absolute decentralization proved its point in the most dramatic way possible. The network continued to run flawlessly, validating transactions and securing billions of dollars without its creator. There is no CEO of Bitcoin to subpoena.
Okay, we know the history, we know the motivation, but let's get into the mechanics. How did Satoshi actually pull off the impossible? How did this 9-page paper actually solve the double spend problem without a central referee?
It wasn't one single new invention. It was an incredibly elegant combination of existing cryptographic tools assembled in a novel way and bound together by brilliant economic incentives.
Okay, let's break it down. First, you have a public append-only ledger, the blockchain. Every participant can see it.
Right, the transparency layer.
Second, you have cryptographic hashing. Think of a hash function as a meat grinder for data. You put any amount of data in a single word or the entire encyclopedia, and it spits out a unique fixed-length string of letters and numbers.
It acts as a digital fingerprint.
Exactly. If you change even one comma in the input data, The output fingerprint changes completely. This is called the avalanche effect. So transactions are bundled into blocks, and each block contains the hash, the fingerprint of the block that came immediately before it.
So they are chained together chronologically.
Right. If I try to go back and alter a transaction from yesterday, the fingerprint for yesterday's block changes, which means today's block, which included yesterday's fingerprint, is now mathematically invalid.
The math instantly breaks.
And the whole network sees I am lying.
Precisely. But that alone doesn't solve the double spend. Because what if someone just creates a fake alternate chain really, really fast? This leads to the true genius part, proof of work.
Explain proof of work to me like I am 5, because this is where people's eyes usually glaze over.
Think of proof of work as a global lottery or a massively difficult Sudoku puzzle. Satoshi introduced a physical cost to this digital system. To add a new block of transactions to the chain, participants, who are called miners, must expend massive amounts of real-world electricity and computational power to guess a random number.
So they are doing work.
Yes, they are running that hash function billions of times a second, trying to find a fingerprint that starts with a specific number of zeros. It requires sheer brute force energy.
And why is that important for security?
Because it costs so much physical energy to write a block, rewriting history becomes prohibitively expensive. An attacker wanting to rewrite the ledger wouldn't just have to change the data. They would have to redo all the physical work, all the electricity expenditure of that block and every block after it, faster than the rest of the honest network combined.
It anchors digital data to real-world physics. But why on earth would anyone spend millions of dollars on electricity and supercomputers just to secure this network?
Economic incentives. Game theory. The protocol is programmed to automatically reward the miner who solves the puzzle first with newly minted Bitcoin plus the transaction fees from that block.
Oh, so they get paid for the work.
It brilliantly aligns pure selfish human interest with network security. It is far more profitable to play by the rules and earn the block reward than it is to spend all that money trying to attack the network and destroy the value of the very coins you're trying to steal.
And finally, how does the network agree? If 2 miners solve the puzzle at the exact same time, which one is the truth?
This is the longest chain rule. Imagine a crowded room where 2 people shout, "I bought a car," and "I bought a boat" at the exact same time.
Okay, so half the room hears car and half hears boat. Who is right without a referee?
The network simply waits for the next block. Whichever side solves the next puzzle first adds to their chain. The network is programmed to always adopt the longest chain, meaning the chain with the most accumulated computational work behind it, as the absolute canonical truth.
What happens to the shorter chain?
The shorter chain is orphaned and discarded by the network.
It is a beautifully brutal, self-correcting organism, a global uniqueness constraint enforced across an open, leaderless, completely untrusted network. The 40-year-old double spend problem finally definitively solved.
It really is a marvel of engineering.
And with that problem solved, a whole new cluster of properties was introduced to the concept of digital money. But as we transition into this next section, looking at how this technology operates in the wild today, it becomes incredibly clear that every single one of these new primitives is a massive double-edged sword.
Yes, every feature has a trade-off.
Let's talk about the big buzzwords you hear all the time: trustless and permissionless.
These terms are heavily misunderstood, often even by people working in the industry. Let's provide a vital clarification. When we say a blockchain system is trustless, it absolutely does not mean that zero trust exists.
Right, that would be impossible.
That is philosophically and functionally impossible in human society.
Yeah.
You always have to trust something.
So you aren't eliminating trust, you are just moving it.
Precisely. Trust is relocated. In the legacy system, you have to trust the discretion, the competence, the morality, and the solvency of a banker. You have to trust that the CEO of the bank isn't gambling with your deposits.
And in a trustless system.
In a trustless crypto system, you shift that trust to open source code, auditable mathematics, and economic game theory. The trust assumptions become explicit and verifiable by anyone in the world who cares to read the code, rather than being institutional, subjective, and completely opaque to the public.
And permissionless means exactly what it sounds like. Anyone with an internet connection anywhere on planet Earth can download the software, join the network, send a transaction, or run a node verifying the ledger.
Yes, no gatekeepers.
You don't have to submit an application, you don't have to show a passport, you don't have to have a certain credit score, and you don't have to ask a compliance officer for approval.
Which leads directly to the next 2 paired concepts: censorship resistance and immutability. Because there is no central authority, no individual, no corporation, and no government can easily block or freeze a valid transaction on the Bitcoin network.
If you pay the fee and have the funds, the transaction routes,
And once a transaction is buried under enough blocks, that history is effectively mathematically unchangeable.
and this is where the dual nature of this technology becomes fiercely debated. Let's look at this objectively based on our sources. This censorship resistance is incredibly useful, right?
Extremely useful for some.
If you are a journalist or a dissident living under an authoritarian regime facing strict capital controls where the government will freeze your bank account for protesting, this technology is a lifeline. It is financial freedom of speech.
But it equally protects the worst actors in society. The exact same property that protects a human rights activist in an oppressive regime perfectly protects a North Korean ransomware syndicate extorting a hospital.
Because the network doesn't know who is who.
The network is completely agnostic to human morality. Immutability means settled. There is no undo button. If a scammer tricks you into sending them funds or a hacker drains a smart contract, that theft is permanent.
You cannot call the blockchain customer service and file a fraud claim. The money is just gone.
Completely gone.
Which brings us to the most terrifying property of all, in my personal opinion.
Hmm.
Self-custody. The crypto ethos of not your keys, not your coins, true absolute ownership.
Through traditional finance, we have the illusion of ownership, but you don't actually own your money. You have an IOU from a bank. You're essentially an unsecured creditor to that institution.
In crypto, if you hold your own private cryptographic keys, those 12 or 24 words we talked about earlier, you hold the bearer asset directly. There is no intermediary who can seize it or lend it out without your permission.
But there is a very dark side to that level of control.
Let me just express the visceral horror of this for a normal person. True ownership means absolute unforgiving responsibility. We are so used to the safety nets of the modern web. If I forget my Netflix password, I click a button, I get an email, I reset it.
That doesn't exist here.
In self-custody crypto, there is no forgot password link. There is no IT department to call. If you fat finger a wallet address when sending a transaction, or if you lose the physical piece of paper or the hard drive containing your private keys, your money is gone. It is vaporized.
It is a harsh reality. There are incredibly famous stories of this. People who mined thousands of Bitcoin on a laptop in 2010 when it was worth pennies threw the old hard drive away and are now literally excavating city landfills looking for a drive containing hundreds of millions of dollars.
Excavating landfills, that is just tragic.
It is estimated that between 3 to 4 million of the 21 million total Bitcoins that will ever exist are permanently, irretrievably lost due to forgotten or misplaced private keys.
3 to 4 million.
Yes. People who died without passing on their passphrases, or who just lost a piece of paper. That value is locked away forever in the math untouchable until the end of time.
That is just wild to think about. Millions of coins, tens of billions of dollars just sitting dormant forever because someone lost a piece of paper or formatted a hard drive.
It highlights the extreme trade-off of self-custody.
So stepping into the shoes of a pragmatic technologist or a CTO evaluating this landscape today, we have to look past both the utopian hyper-libertarian hype and the dystopian it's all a scam doomsaying. We have to evaluate what this technology is actually built for. We need the honest map.
I agree. What is it genuinely good at, and what is it actively inherently bad at?
Let's start with the genuine utilities, the areas where it provides a 10x or even 100x improvement over legacy systems.
First, as we discussed, censorship-resistant value transfer. Moving massive amounts of value across borders 24/7, 365 days a year, settling in minutes, regardless of banking hours, holidays, or geopolitical sanctions.
Try wiring $1 million from New York to a supplier in Indonesia on a Sunday night using the traditional banking system.
It will take days, multiple correspondent banks, high fees, and require manual approval. On a blockchain, it takes minutes and a few dollars.
We also have to mention provable digital scarcity, which is the foundational building block for tokenizing real-world assets, and programmable money, or DeFi, decentralized finance.
DeFi is fascinating. Because the money is native to the internet, it is highly programmable. You can write smart contracts, which is code that acts as an escrow agent, or an exchange that execute exactly as written based on mathematical conditions.
Without needing a lawyer, a broker, or a trusted middleman taking a 5% cut.
Exactly. Yeah. And arguably, its clearest product market fit to date, the thing even traditional finance is adopting rapidly, is stablecoins.
Ah, yes, stablecoins.
Yeah. Yes. Stablecoins are essentially using crypto rails to move dollar-pegged tokens globally. It takes the speed, the round-the-clock availability, and the permissionless nature of crypto networks, but combines it with the unit of account stability of the US dollar.
For someone living in a country with high inflation, access to a digital dollar via a stablecoin on their phone is a life-changing financial upgrade.
Absolutely.
But then we get to the harsh realities, the trade-offs, the things it is simply not good at. And the first one is a massive deal for anyone trying to build consumer apps throughput. Blockchains are fundamentally not built to be fast databases.
No, they are inherently inefficient by design. They are built to be robust, decentralized, and verifiable by anyone running a cheap computer. That inherently sacrifices speed.
What are the actual numbers on that?
Visa handles tens of thousands of transactions per second globally. The Bitcoin base layer handles roughly 7 transactions per second.
Wait, just 7.
Yes, roughly 7. Even modern iterations of Ethereum handle about 15 to 30 on the base layer. You absolutely cannot run the daily micro-commerce of the entire globe buying coffee, paying for bus tickets on a decentralized base layer blockchain. It requires secondary layers like the Lightning Network to scale.
Then there's the privacy myth. This is a huge one. Hollywood and early media coverage did a terrible job here. So many people think crypto is completely anonymous, like digital cash handed over in a dark alley.
It is entirely the opposite. It is vital to understand this. Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin are pseudonymous, but they are radically public.
But that's public.
Every single transaction, the exact amount, the sending address, the receiving address, the exact time, is permanently etched onto a public ledger available for anyone in the world to download and analyze for free.
So it's not private at all.
With modern chain analytics tools used by law enforcement and compliance firms, addresses are routinely and easily de-anonymized by linking them to exchanges where you provided your ID. In many ways, using Bitcoin is vastly less private than using a traditional bank account where your data is siloed and protected by financial privacy laws. It is the most public financial network ever created.
We also have to touch on energy efficiency. Proof of work by design consumes massive amounts of electricity. It is a huge point of contention. The Bitcoin network uses the electricity equivalent of a mid-sized country like Argentina or Sweden.
It does. Now, it is important to note that the industry has evolved. Proof-of-stake systems, which networks like Ethereum transitioned to, have cut that energy consumption by 99.9% by replacing physical mining with staked capital.
But for Bitcoin, the energy expenditure is not viewed as a bug by its proponents.
Right. It is the literal mechanism of security. It is what anchors the digital network to the physical laws of thermodynamics, making it unforgeable. But the environmental debate around that energy use is entirely valid and ongoing.
So what is the final verdict if we synthesize all this engineering analysis?
The overarching lesson is to be highly skeptical of absolutists on either side. Beware of the crypto evangelist who says this technology is strictly better than the banking system in every conceivable way.
And on the flip side,
And equally beware of the traditional financier who tells you it is entirely worthless rat poison. Both extremes are objectively demonstrably wrong based on the engineering. It is simply a different set of engineering trade-offs.
right, you are trading away reversibility, high throughput, and the comfort of customer service handholding. In exchange, you get global decentralization, censorship resistance, and true self-custody.
Precisely.
So what does this all mean when we zoom all the way out past the hashes and the blocks? What is the big takeaway for you listening right now? The most elegant way to synthesize this entire deep dive is to look at it as a single, beautiful spectrum.
It is the grand, eternal trade-off between trust and control.
Trust and control.
Think of a sliding scale. On one far end of the spectrum, you have a traditional modern bank account. It gives you maximum convenience. You have FDIC insurance if the bank fails. You have fraud protection if your card is stolen. You have password resets. You have a customer service line to call.
But you have zero control.
Right. You do not own the asset. You are entirely 100% dependent on the permission of an institution and the government regulating it to access your wealth.
On the other far end of that spectrum, you have physical cash stuffed under a mattress and self-custody cryptocurrency held on a hardware wallet. You have maximum sovereignty. Nobody on earth can freeze your Bitcoin wallet.
Yeah.
Nobody can deny your transaction.
But you bear 100% of the risk. If your house burns down, if a burglar steals your safe, or if you simply lose your private key, there is no safety net. There is no one coming to save you.
Before 2009, digital money only existed on the centralized, high-trust, low-control side of that spectrum. Crypto didn't necessarily replace banking. It didn't destroy Visa. It just used brilliant cryptography to create a brand new point on the curve that simply did not exist before.
Exactly. It gave humanity access to digital, global, programmable money, where the rules were enforced by an open, verifiable network of math instead of a closed institution of men.
And everything else we see in the crypto industry today, the chaotic exchanges, the confusing wallets, the massive regulatory battles, the booms and the busts, is just humanity clumsily scrambling to figure out how to safely interact with that brand new point on the curve.
That is a very accurate assessment.
I love that framing. It clarifies so much. And it leaves me with one final, slightly provocative thought for you to mull over as we wrap up today's deep dive.
Oh, I am curious to hear this.
If we accept the premise we started with, that money is ultimately just a technology and API for tracking human obligations and energy, and we now possess a global ledger of trust that does not require central authority to maintain it, what does that eventually mean for the concept of the nation-state itself?
That is a massive question.
For centuries, the primary absolute power of any government has been the monopolistic control of that very ledger, the ability to print money, control capital flows, and dictate economic reality. If the ledger no longer inherently needs them to function, what happens to the balance of power between the citizen and the state in the 21st century?
That is the multi-trillion-dollar question that the next few decades of history will be forced to answer.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the invisible systems around you, and we will see you next time.